Let's get this going. Been a while. Been a long while since Thanksgiving. Anyways, howdy y'all. This is History by Phillips. I'm Mr. Phillips, and this is a special episode, you could say. First is a remote lesson. First time teaching at home. This is kind of I like this. But anyway, I digress. We're talking about Andrew Jackson. I've been looking forward to this. Part of the survey of U.S. history for a while now. This is my favorite topic that we'll be covering in class this year. We talk about Andrew Jackson. A lot of Tennessee history is going to happen in this lecture series. There'll be 3 lecture videos to this and probably a review on Friday. No study block today. Obviously, this video is coming out late. Got a lot of snow up where I live. Trying to stay warm here. But anyway, I digress. We'll be talking about Andrew Jackson. But this week, we'll be talking about 3 big things. 3 things that we'll be talking about is first, Jacksonian democracy. Basically, more people are getting to vote. Remember, we are a democratic republic. We rule through representatives. People represent us in government. The issue is who's getting to vote and elect these representatives. Not everybody's getting to vote. Not everybody will still have the chance to vote. Obviously, women, Native Americans, African Americans, they still won't have their. But there's some obstacles that get knocked down during Andrew Jackson's time as presidency, especially getting rid of poll taxes and owning property as things. Expands democracy quite a bit. But only to white males. That's the sad part about it. The other part will be talking about conflicts over land. We'll be talking about issues with Native Americans, mostly Cherokees, especially around this area. We'll be talking about the Trail of Tears and the Indian Removal Act of 1836, or 1836, yeah, 1836, Indian Removal Act. And we'll be talking about Andrew Jackson and the role of the federal government. Jackson hates to bank. He's remember, the Democratic Republicans used to believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Doesn't say anything about the uh, national bank in the Constitution. So Andrew Jackson doesn't like it. He thinks it helps the wealthy class while it keeps the poor class even poorer. But I digress. We'll talk about that Thursday. But 2 things that we're going to take away from this lecture series. One is we're going to learn about how American politics and government changes pretty much from the 1820s to the 1840s. And we'll also learn about or discuss about the challenges Native Americans faced during this time as well. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Jacksonian democracy. So, President Monroe's the presidency come to an end. Remember, everybody's a Democrat Republican at the time. The Federalists are kind of nobody likes them. They just remember after the War of 1812, everybody found them unpatriotic. There's a just not going with it. Nobody liked them. Just that person, if you want to look at it that way. But everybody's Democratic Republican. So what you start seeing, unlike today, like this past election when you saw with Trump and Biden, you see everybody's in the same political party, but everybody's representing different parts of the country. These candidates are going to be known as favorite sons, the ones that you see here. And typically, they're all Democratic Republicans, but they represent different parts of the country. Uh, Andrew Jackson, you have Tennessee. Typically, a lot of the Westerners like Andrew Jackson. Same thing with Henry Clay. He's been in Congress. He's a big wig in Congress. Yeah, represents the West as well. Then you got William Crawford. He is actually nominated by the Democratic Republican Party. So he actually has the backing of the party. He's from Georgia, and he's going to represent the South. Then you have John Quincy Adams. That will be President John Adams' son. If you don't remember him, he would take over presidency after George Washington. We talked about the Alien Sedition Act, the XYZ affair, all that. Anyways, he's from Massachusetts. He's from the North, and he's been in politics. I mean, like I said, his dad's president. He's been Secretary of State, I do believe, at this point, so on and so forth. So you got a lot of contenders going up for this election. So let's see what goes on. Well, if you can tell by my map, I tried to find a good one. Jackson wins a plurality, meaning he won. He had the most votes. He had the largest share, more than anybody. But the problem is to become president, you have to have at least 50% of the electoral vote here. So that did not happen. So what happens? It goes to the House of Representatives once again. A lot of these first elections was decided by the House of Representatives. So let's see what they did here. So the election of 1824, a lot of folks refer to it as the corrupt bargain of 1824. So here's what's going on. The House of Representatives has to decide this because once again, nobody had a majority. Andrew Jackson had a plurality, but he did not have a majority. So the House of Representatives has to vote. Well, Henry Clay, he's Speaker of the House, pretty much mean he's the boss or like the head guy of the House of Representatives. He talks to John Quincy Adams. He's like, "Hey, I can influence Congress to vote for you if you in return make me Secretary of State." Because at the time, being Secretary of State was pretty much a guaranteed way to get you to the presidency. Nobody can prove this, though. A lot of people suspect it, but it can't happen. And a shocker, like everybody thought Jackson would get it because he had the most votes, but everybody voted for the guy for John Quincy Adams. Made Andrew Jackson very upset. He's very angry. He starts campaigning for the 1828 election that day. Pretty much 4 years of campaigning for the next election. Now, John Quincy Adams' election, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't nothing really noteworthy. I thought, guys, he tried to establish a national university. He couldn't do that because, once again, it's about how you interpret the U.S. Constitution. Uh, whether it's implied or not implied or consent. My bad. I digress. Anyways, strict or loose interpretation of the Constitution about the national university. But he would manage to pass some uh, legislation to improve the infrastructure, like roads and canals, things of that sort. So it was 1828 election coming again, or coming. Uh, the Democratic Republicans have finally split. You had the Democrats. Uh, the Democrats are going to start supporting Andrew Jackson. They're for state rights, more along the lines of Thomas Jefferson, if you can think of it that way. Then you have John Quincy Adams. They are considered national Republicans. They like a strong central government. Uh, that's pretty much the big difference in them. Once again, it's going to become a landslide though. So Andrew Jackson, he wins beyond a shadow of a doubt. In this campaign though, you see a lot of mudslinging. They'll make a lot of remarks about Andrew Jackson's wife, uh, Rachel. She would end up dying before he actually went to the White House. Same thing, vice versa. Jackson accused him of being part of the rich upper echelon of society, trying to keep the poor man poor, yada, yada, yada. But I digress. But what you see here is the first time when a lot of these states got rid of their having to own property or having to pay a poll tax to vote. A lot of these states they voted for Andrew Jackson, and like where the property requirement in a lot of these states, the upper echelon they didn't really get rid of it. A lot of them didn't. They voted for Quincy Adams. So what you see is or a lot of folks call this the common man coming to office. Like the first 5 presidents, everybody thinks of them as the founding fathers from Washington to Monroe. But then you had Quincy Adams. But then you got Jackson, kind of like the outsider. He was an orphan boy, becomes a war hero. He's like the American story. You can make it if you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, kind of thing. Well, his inauguration, it wasn't like these fancy ones that you see today. It was pretty much a party. This scared a lot of folks in Washington D.C. I mean, it got so bad, like they was storming the White House, just tearing up the place. Everybody's outside having a good time. They had to put tubs of whiskey outside so everybody would pass out. So Jackson here could sneak out the back window and go about doing his job being president. Uh, but yeah, it's just a mark in or a change in politics, a change in I don't know society how it runs now. It seems like it belongs more to the people now than instead of these upper echelons. If that makes sense. I digress. Jacksonian democracy. So Andrew Jackson as president. His big thing that he ran on was equal protection and benefits. Most white males could vote now, no more having to have own property or pay a poll tax. He would replace a lot of these bureaucrats or these non-elected officials in government. Uh, think of these as like the president's cabinet. Some of these posts, a lot like the upper postal jobs. Just pretty much government jobs that are not elected. He'd get rid of. President Trump, I don't know if you remember back then, but he kind of did the same thing, drain the swamp. That's kind of the same what Andrew Jackson's trying to do here. He's trying to drain the swamp. All these people that got these government jobs that are kind of mooching off the government, not really working for the people. Andrew Jackson's trying to get rid of it. That's what Donald Trump ran on. Here's what he ran on back in 2016. But yeah, that's what Andrew Jackson does. So he replaces all these bureaucrats with people that he knows, especially in the president's cabinet. Just replaced them with pretty much folks call them good old boys. They would make fun of it and call it the kitchen cabinet. But we'll talk about that in the next video. So tariffs. So a big thing that boiled down to with him and his vice president, mind you, his vice president. Recall the northern economy, they like the tariffs because the tariffs are making everybody have to buy these American products. Uh, because remember, the British goods are cheaper and better made, but when you put a tariff on it, it makes it more expensive. So people start buying these American goods. It helps American business. Well, mostly helps the North because remember they're industrialized. Unlike the South, their economy is based on agriculture, which is backed by slave labor. But President Jackson supported the tariffs. Yes, he's from the West and from the South, but he realizes uh, supporting American business and building that infrastructure as a whole, as a union, as a federal entity, that's good as a whole for everybody. But President or Vice President John C. Calhoun, his vice president, he was Quincy Adams' vice president for a while. He kind of jumped ship and went to Jackson. But anyway, he does not. He thinks these tariffs are terrible. Uh, he's about to nullify it. Recall the resolutions of Kentucky and Virginia back in 1798 and 1799. Uh, During President Adams' Alien Sedition Acts, they passed resolutions to nullify it. Well, in 1832, South Carolina's Vice President Calhoun's home state, mind you, passed the Nullification Act, which pretty much means they're not going to pay these tariffs anymore. Well, Andrew Jackson's not going to have that. You got to preserve the Union. Uh, he asked Congress to pass the force bill, pretty much like, you know what? If South Carolina's not going to play ball, I'm going to take the military down there and force them to pay these tariffs. But South Carolina nullifies that one too. They agreed to pay the tariff, the lower tariff. They lowered the tariffs. South Carolina agreed to those, but no, South Carolina nullified the force bill too. We refer to this as the nullification crisis. But what you see here is a struggle between state rights and the federal government. Who should have more say in what? You also start seeing divisions between the North and the South. Uh, because remember, South Carolina, they're not going to like these tariffs. They're a southern state. Uh, their economy is mostly based on agriculture. They got a lot of rice down in South Carolina, a lot of cotton. That's pretty much the edge of the cotton belt. Uh, but yeah, they're not going to like these tariffs. But you'll start seeing this. So Andrew Jackson, yes, he might be a Westerner, Southerner, but he has to represent the Republic as a whole. Uh, John C. Calhoun, on the other hand, I guess you can say he sent it from South Carolina's state point of view. He's not liking his tariffs. These tariffs are not helping him. Also, one thing to make note of, something called the Maysville Road is going to go straight through Kentucky, but Kentucky only. Andrew Jackson vetoed that. Uh, Andrew Jackson used the veto more than any president up till him. But basically, his argument was that, well, since the road is only in Kentucky and Kentucky only, that should be a state project, not a federal project. But I digress. That's all for today's lesson. Uh, be back at the schoolhouse tomorrow. Be back at Edgemont. Cobb County's got a ball game tonight. I do believe that kicks off at 5:30. Spurs up. Uh, I'll digress. But this has been History by Phillips. I've been Mr. Phillips. I will see y'all next time. Until then, take care and peace.